Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Connection. Those of you who are here in person with me, as well as you who are joining us online. We are going to begin today with our devotion right after we prepare our hearts and open our minds with our prayer of surrender. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it. I perceive it. And now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. All right, we're going to do some math this morning. Yay, everybody's favorite subject. I'm just joking. Everybody who knows me knows I'm not great at math. The title of our devotion is When Two Halves Do Not Make a Whole. As we know, in mathematical terms, that's true. That's a fact. 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1 whole. But with people, that math does not work that way. Spiritual math or energetic math is a little different. That kind of math can be exponential. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the scripture, 1 can put 1,000 to flight, 2 can put 10,000 to flight. Now, logically or mathematically speaking, if 1 could put 1,000 to flight, you would say then 2 would put 2,000, but no, it jumps up to 10,000 instead, because this verse is talking about how strong the power of agreement is. When two people are really in one accord, having the same purpose, when they're in sync with each other, then their power and their energy grows exponentially. So that's probably a good topic for a future teaching, spiritual mathematics. I may have to explore that a little bit. I'm sure I will like that much better than regular math. Okay, so here's our affirmation. Today, I will work on becoming whole and complete on my own. The text begins, ultimately, you're responsible for keeping your own emotional cup full. Think about it this way. Whatever frequency or vibration you send out, that's the vibration you will attract back to yourself. Okay, time out. We've talked about this before. What we call the law of attraction is actually the law of radiation, because that's how it works. We send out a certain frequency and it goes and finds or locates whatever energy or emotion or material thing that is on its same frequency, because those are the things that are in resonance with it. So things that are on that frequency are what it understands. They speak the same language so that they can communicate with each other. So that's why we say sometimes we use that phrase, I just vibe with them. Like, that's what that means. We are on a similar enough vibration that we are able to communicate with each other. That's why we are attracted to them. So whatever level of energy it is you're sending out, that's what is attracted back to you. So if this is true, then if you're sending out the vibration of needing someone to complete you because you feel incomplete on your own, or if you're sending out the frequency of wanting someone to come into your life and fix you because you feel broken and unable to fix yourself, then what are you inviting in? Okay, in essence, this is asking, what language are you speaking? Because you're only going to be able to communicate with others who are speaking the same energetic language that you're speaking. So the answer to that question, what are you inviting in? If you're looking for someone to fix you and make you feel complete, the answer is someone else who is also vibrating on the frequency of being needy and incomplete and broken. So I also want to interject here that this is not only referring to romantic relationships. That's what our minds go to first. And most of the time when we start talking about this concept of two halves making a whole, you know, the little necklaces that used to be popular where it was a broken heart and you had half and your little boyfriend or girlfriend had the other half. So it's become common to call our spouse or our partner, refer to them as my other half or even my better half. And that's okay. That's cute. That's a way to show them that you love them. On some level, that works. But as we'll talk about a little later on in our teaching today, what you say, the words you use are actually really important. That's kind of a side point, though. Where I was going with that is this is referring to any relationship with a family member, maybe a parent, or a friend, a coworker, even your pastor. You can develop an unhealthy, codependent relationship with anyone where you feel your very survival and well-being depend on them and your relationship with them. That you wouldn't be able to make it without them. When you get to that place, that is very dangerous emotional territory because it is just a symptom and a signal that you have a hole somewhere inside you that you're expecting and wanting someone else to fill for you. It's a sign that you are lacking something. Okay, back to the text. Sometimes we like to think in terms of two halves making a whole, but that's not the way it works in relationships. That's just two broken people coming together, which usually results in a broken relationship. A better solution is to work on making yourself whole and complete. Fill your own cup first and then connect with another person who is whole and complete in themselves. All right, so there it is. That's the ticket. That's our goal. All right, let's end with our prayer. Source of wholeness, help me to understand that I do not need anyone else to make me feel whole and complete. I am whole and complete within myself. And when that's the vibration I send out, that's the kind of person I will attract to myself. Amen. Okay, so I'm going to give it away and tell you that I wrote today's devotion, and I say that because if I could go back and tweak it just a little bit, I would say people rather than person and expand it to include all types of relationships, not just romantic ones, because a lot of us are in our partnership permanently, and so we're thinking, well, this doesn't apply to me, but it does. It applies to everyone. Okay, let's take a deep breath now and start our teaching portion by saying our connection affirmation. I allow perfect health in my body, perfect peace in my mind, perfect unconditional love in my heart, and the perfect divine timing of source of spirit to guide my life in thought, word, and deed. I got a little cocky and thought I could do that without looking down. I used the wrong word. All right. I want to start today, as I used to so often, by giving you a couple of quotes that are going to be key to what we're talking about today. Here's the first one. Our thoughts control the energy within and around us. And I would add to that, our words also control the energy within and around us. Our thoughts are like the stage of creation that we've talked about. They exist as imagination. But when we speak words out loud, that's connected to manifestation. So it takes both, and both are extremely important in the process of creating for ourselves a reality that we enjoy and that we prefer. Second quote is this: when we speak to the highest in people, people respond from the highest in them. Now, obviously not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, how you speak to someone will determine how they respond to you. Because again, back to our devotion, our energy is always looking for other energy that speaks its language. Have you ever heard people say things like, if you treat someone like an animal, they'll act like an animal, or if you speak to someone like a child, you're most likely going to get a childish response from them? All right, again, that's because energy is always seeking other energy that it resonates with, and all of us are capable of vibrating at different levels of energy. We decide what frequency we want to be on. But our first instinct is to give someone back the same energy they're giving us, which is how a lot of arguments start. But we don't have to respond in kind when someone is speaking to us or treating us in a manner that we feel is less than or lower than what we deserve. That's what living consciously means. We don't just react with the first emotion that comes up in us. We pause, check in with our higher self, and ask, how can I respond with love to this person? What is the most loving response I can give to this energy that they're throwing my way? If it's low vibration energy, we can consciously choose not to reciprocate down on that low vibrational energy level. Dr. Kim Duramo, who I love and I quote a lot, she has a little exercise that she talks about that she calls instant elevation. The way you remember it is by saying A, B, C. Okay, the A stands for awareness. When you are presented with a level of energy from someone that doesn't feel good to you, first, be aware of it. This person's energy is a little off, and then be aware of what energy it's bringing up in you. Then, instead of immediately responding on that level, stop and breathe. That's the B. A is the awareness, B is breathe, and become aware of the fact that you have a choice of how you're going to respond. You don't have to allow yourself to get caught up in their energy. And then the C is just that, conscious choice. You can choose to respond from a higher vibration. You can choose to speak to the higher or to the divine nature in them, because it's there no matter who they are or how they're behaving. All of us have a divine nature inside, whether we're operating in it or acting out of it at the moment or not. Or you can choose to just ignore it and walk away. When you take the time to become aware of what's happening, to pause, first of all, A, aware, and then pause or breathe instead of immediately being pulled in, B, then make a conscious choice to stay in your own level of frequency, C, then you also stay in control of your energy and instead of riding someone else's emotional roller coaster. So does anyone remember that phrase that we used to hear a lot more often in the past than we do now, that fathers used to say to sons, or older men specifically would say to younger men? They would say, don't let your mouth write a check that your body can't cash. Has anybody ever heard anybody say that before? Okay, that's really outdated now for so many reasons, not the least of which is who's written a check recently. But we won't take the time to go into that. But the premise is, and it's also sexist because women can get pulled into this. It applies to all of us, not just men. It was just more common for fathers to say this to sons. The basic point is, though, hey, don't run your mouth and make someone so angry at you or with you that they want to fight you unless you're ready and capable to fight back. Another way to say it is, don't start something you cannot finish. And in today's culture of the wonderful internet, it has become too easy, I think, for people to say things online, sitting in their house behind a keyboard or typing on their phone, without having to actually put themselves in a situation where the consequences of what they're speaking would ever be an issue. Or, in other words, where they would ever have to back up what they're saying. A lot of people are really big and bad and bold online because they know they're never going to have to look that person in the eye and say that to them face to face in real life. They're never going to have to stand toe to toe with that person. And so they're a lot more free with their words, especially the negative ones, which is unfortunate, but it's just a product of the time we live in. So knowing that this is the case, we've got to try even harder these days in the age of the internet to be mindful of how we speak to each other. And just as importantly, how we speak to ourselves. The scripture in the Bible says the power of life and death is in the tongue. And that has never been more true than today. So we're going to begin by talking about water. That's obvious, right? That was the obvious thing in your mind, right? You'll see how it connects in just a second. I'll give you a little tie-in. We did talk in the devotion about your emotional cup. So what do you put in cups? Sometimes you put water in cups. So I'm going to make the connection to say that water, our words are the water that we fill our emotional cup with. So the quality of that water matters. There is a book called The Secret Messages in Water by a Japanese doctor who has now made his transition. His name was Dr. Masaru Emoto, and I've spoken with you about this book before, but we're going to go back and revisit some of the things he said because they are wonderful. I actually watched a documentary based on his book, from which I will now read some excerpts. It says, "Nothing in the world is softer and more yielding than water. Yet it wears down the hard and strong, and there is not much that can overcome it or withstand its power when it is unleashed with force." All right, so think of the incredible damage that's done by hurricanes and tsunamis, or the fact that the Grand Canyon, they say, geologists tell us, was actually created by water wearing down that path that is now the Grand Canyon. That which is yielding often conquers the strong. That's a very deep saying. I'm going to say it again. That which is yielding, like water, fluid, often conquers that which is strong, and that which is soft many times overcomes that which is hard. These are observations by the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. Every one of water's properties is unique, and they do not easily fit into the generally accepted laws of physics. Science has not yet been able to answer the question of why water is the only substance on the planet that can exist in 3 states: liquid, solid, and gas. Okay, so we're not just doing math today, we're doing science. You guys deserve a little bit of college credit, or at least continuing education when we get done today. No scientist has been able to explain why water's density increases below the freezing point and becomes less above freezing. Any other substance contracts when it's cool, but water does the opposite. It expands. So what we're saying is water defies nature, or what we know about nature. Even if a single one of these anomalies were not present, life on this planet would not exist. That's how vital water is to life. Here's an interesting story. In 1956, in Southeast Asia, at a secret military installation used for developing weapons of mass destruction, work was being done on a powerful new line of bacterial and biological weapons. In a meeting, scientists were discussing what properties each weapon should have. Suddenly, the session breaks off, and all of the participants must be taken to the hospital due to symptoms of severe food poisoning. An investigation into what happened quickly hits a dead end as it is discovered the scientists had consumed nothing but the water from the carafes on their conference table. The water was tested. No harmful additives were found. Its chemical composition was H2O, and that's what the report said. Poisoning caused by ordinary water. 20 years later, a fantastical hypothesis was put forward that could explain the unpredictable behavior of this water. Water has memory. So basically, what this is saying is just these men sitting in a room talking about which poisons would be most effective to use as weapons actually poison the water in the room so much so that they all had to be hospitalized. Okay, that's amazing. And we don't hear a lot about it. Experiments done in many countries around the world since then have shown that water receives and makes an imprint of any outside influence, remembering everything that occurs in the space that surrounds it. Any substance coming into contact with water leaves a trace in the water. As it records information, water acquires new properties, yet its chemical composition remains unchanged. Therefore, the structure of water is much more important than its chemical makeup or composition. The structure refers to how its molecules are organized. These organizations cluster together in various forms, and it is these clusters that record the history of water's relationship with the world around it as if on magnetic tape. The chemical composition of water may remain the same while its structure, just like the human nervous system, reacts to any irritation around it. A scientist in Russia states, "We have carried out many experiments on the effect that quite diverse samples have on water: magnetic fields, electrical fields, as well as human presence. It became clear that human emotions, both negative and positive, have the strongest influence on water's structure. In one experiment, a group of people were asked to sit in a room and project onto a flask of water in front of them very positive emotions such as love, tenderness, and concern. Then the flask was replaced with another one, and people were asked to project emotions of a different type: fear, aggression, and hatred. After this, measurements were taken on the samples. The water exhibited changes that were clearly in one direction or another. It was concluded that love increases water's energy levels and stabilizes it, while aggressive emotions reduce the energy and make radical changes in the water's structure. Dr. Masuro Emoto of Japan also conducts research on water samples, subjecting them to various outside forces. The impressions they then made on the water are recorded by swiftly freezing it in a cryogenic chamber. So they expose the water to these various samples or stimuli, and then they quickly freeze it so they can look at the organization of the molecules under the microscope to see what these outside stimuli have caused. And because this was on a video I was watching, they were obviously showing pictures, but I can try to describe to you what I saw. It says for the water molecules that were heated in a microwave or that were set next to a cell phone looked chaotic and disordered, while the molecules of water that were in the presence of people saying things like thank you and excuse me looked like beautiful snowflakes. On and on it went, and time after time, the outcome was the same. Scattered, disjointed, and fragmented molecule clusters resulted when in the presence of people saying things like, "You disgust me." And beautiful kaleidoscopic patterns resulted from phrases such as, "I love you." So, wow. The video goes on at some length describing in detail these various effects of the structure of on the structure of water, including how plants watered with water that had been purposely structured with positive emotions grew faster and bigger than those watered with unstructured water. So that whole thing about talking to your plants, that's true. Because what you're speaking to is the water in the plants. All right. So why have I spent so much time talking about water and its structure? I'm about to tell you. At present, scientists have been able to figure out how these changes in water structure take place, but not why. What they do know is that depending on our age, humans are composed from 70 to 90% water. An adult drinks approximately 2.5 liters of water each day. I'm laughing because I just had a discussion with Ginger and Katie and several others before about how I don't drink enough water, and I don't. And this is one of the reasons why I need to address that. So, an adult drinks approximately 2.5 liters of water each day in order to sustain normal life functions. Another 1.5 liters is absorbed through the skin during bathing or showering. Our brains are 80% water. How a person handles water is so important. If he approaches the water with positivity, if he says thank you to it or blesses it before drinking, the quality of the water will improve and it will have a beneficial effect on the person and his body. All right, so by now you can probably see where I'm going with this. Our very bodies themselves are over 50% water. And so if the water, as we have learned, has memory, and if it records everything around it, and if what affects it most are human emotions and how and what we speak to and around it is able to change its very structure, then it's of the utmost importance both how we speak to ourselves and how we speak to each other. That old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, turns out to be not true. So before we move on to the subject, though, of how we speak to each other, I just want to conclude this part by, reading to you the final words from the video I was watching, because they are really beautiful. The narration says this: there have been many wars on religious grounds in human history, but in our experiments, water reacted to individual words that had a religious or spiritual connotation by forming beautiful and symmetrical crystals. So what they're saying is, even though men and women have used religion to justify very bad things, in general, the concepts of these different religions had a very positive effect on the structure of water. This means that the conception of our nature coincides with each religion. And then the video shows pictures of these beautiful crystals that look like snowflakes that had been formed when Christian, Buddhist, and Muslim prayers were recited in their presence. Dr. Emoto presumes that serious crimes are committed most in areas where people curse most often. Okay? And then in the video, there's this series of pictures of these ugly and scarred looking crystals that are shown that have formed in the presence of words like idiot and phrases such as I hate you. Laboratory containers of water were inscribed with ancient hieroglyphs denoting words. So they didn't even have words on some of them. They just put these symbols or pictures of things that represented concepts. And then it shows this vast difference between the structure of the crystals on which contained words or symbols that represented love, hope, and soul versus uglier, more negative symbols. Dr. Emoto's numerous experience aimed at finding the word that cleanses water the most powerfully have shown that it's not just one word, but rather a combination of two. Anybody want to guess what those two words are that most positively affect the structure of water? Love and gratitude. The universe was created by the absolute, by the source, which produced all that exists in all its material manifestations. Each of us contains an element of the water from that primeval ocean. Our every word is like a water drop, a medium of thought, a source of information. And we are all here to repay the absolute with our love and our gratitude. So that was the end of the information from the video. It was very beautiful. All right, so how do we do that? How do we repay the absolute, or as we might refer to it, God, this source that has given us this beautiful life? Well, one very important way is by being mindful of how we speak to one another. I'm going to read now from a piece I listened to recently on the subject of sacred unions, and it's going to sound very much like what we talked about in our devotion. This is from a woman named Jay. She didn't list a last name. She said, sacred unions are more than just romantic relationships. I treat every person in my life, every family member, every friend, every client, as if they are my soulmate, because in a way they are. Every relationship we have is sacred in its own right. Anyone who crosses your path is sacred. But even in these relationships, we spend so much of our time focused on the other half of the union, on the other person. We spend so much time judging what's in their cup and deciding if it's a good match for what's in ours. In other words, we spend a lot of time thinking about how the things they bring to the relationship serve us. But what about our half of the union? What is the role we play for the other person? And this started me thinking about how we communicate with each other. Specifically, what words do we use when speaking to others? Sometimes we're so quick to point out the negative. We know that everyone we encounter is a mirror for us, but we often forget that we are also a mirror for them. And much of what goes on in this mirroring process is unconscious. Sometimes we are completely unaware of what we are triggering within others, and we can't control that. But what about the part that is conscious? What about the part we can control? Do we spend enough time being mindful of the things that come out of our mouths, or do we just spend all day blurting out things unconsciously? All right, so we're going back now to Dr. Kim's ABC. Are we aware? Do we stop and breathe? And then do we make a conscious choice? Or do we just, boop, say it? When you look at someone, when you talk to someone, anyone, do you see it as a sacred union, a spiritual interaction? Are you mindful of what you're reflecting back to them? Do you go out of your way to show them the worst parts of themselves? or do you speak what is best and to what is best and highest in them? Do you take the time to praise the things that are good about people? Now, I'm going to stop here and say this is one thing that I was taught, and you may not feel this way, but like if something's wrong with somebody, I mean, as far as like if they've got a run in their hose or some, when we used to wear pantyhose, if they can't do anything about it, sometimes it's better just not to say it, because then it just brings their attention to it. There's nothing they can do about it anyway, so just leave it. If it's something they can correct, you may want to go say, hey, da-da-da-da. But if it's something that they can't fix, it's just going to make them feel worse. Just don't tell. Just don't tell them. They're going to figure it out eventually without you having to say, did you know? Okay, so there's been quite a lot of talk in the past few years, I love this part, about living your authentic life and speaking your truth, even if it is unpopular. Yes, 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 and yes. But we must never confuse that with or use it as an excuse for just saying whatever we want to say with absolutely no thought for how it will affect someone else or no thought for any consequences we might suffer for saying it. Again, back to our devotion. We need to realize that our truth might sometimes clash with another person's, and they have the same right that we do to speak their truth. Speaking the truth or your truth is never supposed to be about hurting someone else. All right, so a couple of observations here. Number one, we've got to learn in this era of speaking our truth, which is important, but we must also bring some maturity and some discernment to it. We must rightly divide and learn to count the cost of what we're about to say before we say it. Once you speak something, it's out there. We've all heard the little analogy about the feathers in the pillow. If you tear a pillow open and blow the feathers everywhere, can you ever go back and find all those feathers? No. Once you say something, you've said it. And whoever heard it and however it affected them, that's going to stay with them. Even if you go back and apologize if you think you were wrong or that you hurt them, it's still there. Our very words are extremely powerful, just like we were talking about a few minutes ago with the water. Our words have the power to rearrange atoms, to move material substances. So we need to weigh them before we put them out there, all right? So be aware, breathe, make a conscious choice about what you're about to say. Number two, we must always follow the biblical admonition to speak the truth in love. Okay, that's what the Bible tells us to do. You can tell somebody the truth, but make sure you're doing it out of love. Truth is not always easy, okay? I ran into a situation like this yesterday with a person very close to me. I had to say something to this person that this person did not want to hear, but I tried to say it as lovingly as I possibly could. Everything you need to say to someone, they're not going to welcome it, and they're not always going to want to hear it. But even the toughest thing you find it necessary to say to someone can still be delivered with love or in love, coming from a place of love. And you know the difference. You can tell by the way it feels. It's like that old adage that parents used to say to you when they were disciplining their this is going to hurt me more than it does you. And it does. Okay, parents don't discipline their children, especially physically, because it brings them joy. No, they do it because they understand at the moment that's what's best for the child, and that's what the child needs. It doesn't make a parent happy to inflict pain on their child, to see their child cry. But if the discipline and the infliction of that pain is coming from a place of love, then it will bear fruit. Now, unfortunately, abusive situations, even between parents and children, do exist. And usually if you go back into the life of an abusive parent, you'll find they were abused as a child. And that's not what I'm talking about. But again, you can always tell by the way it feels. In the end, the abuser feels just as much pain as the abused. Now, if your discipline is not coming from a place of abuse, then you've done the right thing and you won't feel that pain. But the abuser, believe me, even though they don't show it, they feel as much pain as the person being abused because it's just a cycle. True discipline, though, that comes from the heart of love might not feel good in the moment, but when the fruit of it starts appearing in that child's life, or whoever it is you're dealing with, who you're having to be a little tough with by telling them a truth, either about themselves or a truth or your truth that's not very comforting to them, then that's when it feels good. When that behavior starts to change and you know that you see that they have learned a lesson, the light comes on, okay, that the little, or they have that aha moment of, oh, and sometimes they'll even, I was talking to a young lady recently who said that she never realized how much grief she had given her mother until she had to deal with a child herself, not her own child, a stepchild. But she said, I call my mother now regularly and say, thank you, Mom. I'm sorry I put you through this because now I know how it feels. So when that's a different kind of discipline. And when you feel good about it is when you see the fruits that it produces. But that's a very different scenario from just blurting out something you feel like saying without first weighing the words, thinking about how they affect others, counting the cost of the possible consequences, and then making sure your heart is right and that you're coming from a place of love before you say it. Only after all that has been done should you speak your truth. Okay, back to the message from Jay. Think about how you would like to be made to feel by the words of others in your life and ask yourself if you are doing that for them. Are you holding up your end or your half of the sacred unions you are a part of? Okay, this is just as simple as do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In our current world of social media, it's become too easy to become judgmental of everything because we are constantly being presented with the option to either like or not like, to give something a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Okay, it's too easy, as I said before, to sit behind a keyboard and type insulting, inflammatory words to or about someone without having to look them in the eye when you say it, and possibly never be held accountable for what you have just said. It has given all of us a false sense of relationship and has overblown in our own minds the importance of our own opinion, and because of that, we've become very reactionary. So, wow. Yes, think about this for a moment. As we talked about before, the difference between before and after social media. We've always had the ability and the tendency to judge other people, what they look like, the things they say, etc. But prior to social media, we did not have such a ready platform to express that judgment. Before, if you saw someone and didn't like something about the way they looked, there was no way to express it unless you just walked up to them in real life, or as people now text IRL, it took me a while to realize what that meant, in real life, and tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, I think that's an ugly dress, or I don't like your shoes, or you might want to think about going up a size, that's a little too tight. So, you might think it, and you might say it to the person beside you, and y'all might have a little laugh about it, but very few people would really walk up and approach a person just to say something like that to them. Not the majority of us. But now, a person can post a picture of themselves online and bam, immediately, people start coming out of the woodwork to let them know exactly how they feel, what they think about every aspect of that picture. It has just given us opportunities that we have not had before. It's made that tendency we have to judge so much easier to express, which is why we have to be a little more mindful, why we have to be a little smarter on both sides of the equation. We have to think a little bit more about what we say, okay, and maybe put it to the test of, if this person were standing right in front of me, would I still say this to them face to face? If not, you probably shouldn't say it online. But the other side of this is we have to be more careful and more mindful of what we post of ourselves. If we know we're sensitive, especially maybe about the way we look, and we know our feelings are possibly going to be hurt if someone makes a derogatory comment, then don't put yourself in that position. Don't post that picture if you know you're not going to be able to handle it well if people criticize it. Same thing when you post an opinion. Okay, especially if it's a strong one and you know beforehand that some people are going to disagree with you. Be smart. If you post it, count the cost and know some people are going to disagree. If you feel you cannot handle being disagreed with on this particular topic, do not post it. Simple. Once again, I go back to the incredible power of words. Once you put it out there, it's out there, and it's open for everyone else's judgment. And I'm not saying don't put it out there, especially if it's something that's important to you and that you believe in strongly. You have a right to do that. But once you put it out there, don't allow yourself to feel victimized when and if people disagree with you. Count the cost. Weigh your words. So, when we're talking about speaking our truth, what are we using that truth for? What's our motivation for saying it? Just to get others to agree with us? To validate us? Like I was saying before, do you need the opinions of other people to fill up some kind of lack inside you? Do you really need other people to agree with you so badly that you want to put it out there even if you know some people are going to be harsh with you? And how are we using our truth, especially in the form of our words, in regards to our sacred unions with the people in our lives? Are we using it to build them up, or are we using it to do battle? It's easy to point out the negative and to begin to focus on what's lacking, but sometimes we just need to find the courage to say, I love you more than this argument, or our relationship means more to me than being right about this particular thing. So I'm just going to let it go for the sake of not destroying our relationship. All right, so let's wrap this up. When something hurts us, when people say harsh words to us, it not only affects us mentally and psychologically, but as we've learned today, it even affects us physically through the water that's in our brains and in our bodies. And blessing it, acknowledging it, finding the beauty in it if we can, changes the structure of the water inside us back to something that's beautiful. We're not only responsible for what's coming out of our mouths to others, but we're also responsible for what we allow into us. Our number one responsibility is caring for our own temple. We can't always control what goes on around us, what we hear, but once we hear it and it has affected us, we now know that we have the power to restructure it through our own words to ourselves. I think I said this a week or two ago. If somebody says something to you, you don't have to pick that up and carry it. It's your choice to pick it up and carry it. If you know it's not true about you, don't pick it up. Anybody can sit around and say negative things on the internet. That's easy. In fact, it's been made far too easy for us. But don't take the bait. Don't do the easy thing. Let's come up a little higher. It's harder to be mindful. It's easier just to stay down in that eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, however you come at me, that's how I'm going to come back at you. But when we see, look around you and let's see where that's gotten us. Or is that gotten us into a peaceful situation? No. So let's be aware. A, let's breathe. B, then let's make a conscious choice. C, to go higher. Let's be more concerned with what's in our own cup and what kind of mirror we're being to others than how they are reflecting us. Let's start speaking to the higher nature in people and not give any energy away to them. Give no place to the lower nature. And finally, a little review from last week. Let's learn most of all how to keep our own temple clean and beautiful. Let's remember, even when people say unkind things to us, it's not what they call you that matters. It's what you answer to. It's how you acknowledge even the worst things people say to you and then restructure them that can turn them into a beautiful blessing. I want to end with a little poem I came across that reminds us that we are ultimately all one, and how important, because of that, it is to be a good mirror for others. We don't need anyone else to fix us or to complete us, but we do need to be good mirrors for each other so we can see ourselves more clearly. Not codependent, but interdependent, interconnected. All right, so here is the poem. It's called How to See Light in Others. See yourself in me, for my light shines in your eyes. Sometimes a brighter light or a darker you will find. But stay near me, for you and I are spirits in kind. Even though you may not know me, a connection is inside. as one considers the light of another to find, if we can just look deep enough, we will see the nature that we are both from. We will see the light that is one. Amen? Okay, as we stand together and sing our ending song, Blessed Always, I'd just like to acknowledge that today, May 30th, would have been our late bishop's, my Uncle Earl, as I used to call him when I was a little girl, Uncle Early. It would have been his 96th birthday today. So we say happy heavenly birthday to Bishop Paulk and thank him and acknowledge everything he did for us, the love he showed, and the leadership he provided during all the years he was here with us. So I want to say blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say amen. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say amen. Be at peace. Have a great week. Join us tomorrow night for our study series, Friday morning for the devotion, and then again on Sunday. I love you. Have a great week.